Thank you, everybody. Very great. Delighted to see you. I have to say I'm even more delighted because 15 minutes ago, I wasn't quite sure that I was going to be on this stage because I was in the Excel Centre where last year's AI Summit took place, and I moderated a discussion. I was looking around some very interesting-looking gym equipment, thinking this can't be right, and rang Chris, and he told me that we were here. So fortunately, I had my Brompton that I bought 6 weeks ago, which has paid for itself 10 times over there, I can tell you. Well, I'm obviously very honoured to be surrounded by such erudite, authoritative panellists today. That is very good news from my point of view, because my background, as some of you may know, was in political and general journalism, not in science. So I will be testing to destruction the maxim that there's no such thing as a stupid question in this panel today. What I will ask, first of all, for each of our panelists to just give us a few minutes of an appraisal as to how they see the current landscape and perhaps how it's moved on over the past 12 months and where the next the areas of big potential are. We obviously have Rachel representing the government from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Keith from Fujitsu, and Philip with the perspective from Financial Services and HSBC. So I'll allow them, if you like, to open up one by one, then I'll ask them a few questions, and obviously very keen after that to have the opportunity for you to ask some questions as well. So why don't Rachel, why don't you kick off with the view from Whitehall as to how we are progressing to becoming that quantum-ready economy?
Sure, thank you. So just to introduce myself briefly, I'm Rachel Mays, so I'm the head of quantum technologies at Bayes, so I head up the quantum team, and we work within a wider team on technology, strategy and security. So I think it's a great question in terms of where are we and where have we come from, and I think I'm quite new to quantum for the last couple of years for me, so I have a background in tech strategy and policy, and just so much has changed over that period. I think we've got a really vibrant community of startups in the UK, and the quantum program, which has been going for a number of years now, has really started to create a lot of, actual real-world examples of use cases for quantum, speaking more generally than compute. So I think the UK is in a good place, and in terms of quantum, that sort of quantum readiness journey, I think I'm interested to talk today about how people can actually start their journey and what the different phases are. So I can talk a bit about the strategy and the program probably a bit later on.
Great, fantastic. Keith, let me turn to you. You obviously have a lot of interactions and touch points over the years with the public sector, with government and governments as well. Take me through how you see the value of that link and how you see things moving right at the moment.
So, I mean, we announced, along with the ministerial announcements the last couple of days, the establishment of our Centre for Cognitive and Advanced Technologies, which is aimed specifically at the rapid commercialisation of research. So sitting slightly to the right of the D of R&D, and how do we commercialise technologies faster? One of the reasons for establishing that is because this is a problem that both the UK and Japan has, right? So in the UK, we want to be a science superpower. We're third in the world for research, as we all are very proud. And on almost every league table or assessment, that's the case. But when you look at our ability to commercialise that research at scale, we have not been performing in recent years since about 2010 in the way we would want to. And in fact, there's an ERC, an Enterprise Research Council paper that shows us going backwards consistently in that period. I mean, that said, as you've heard from all the ministerial announcements today, over the last few days, there have been record amounts of investment in the last 12 months. There's a science council that the Prime Minister chairs. There's a whole raft of things that are going on in government that are giving commercial organisations and academia touch points to try to understand how we solve that problem. So I think compared to 12 months ago, we're light years ahead. I mean, I'm tempted to reach for the obvious analogy here and not doing so. But we are certainly a leap ahead from where we were 12 months ago. And I think that's a lot of that owes its origin to the science superpower agenda that was laid out in the integrated review, which I'm very proud to have played a role in during my time in number 10. But equally now, what you see is that, I mean, that just sets the head mark and the direction. And what you see now is the intensifying technological competition between states globally, and then you see that flowing down through the direction the integrated review gave into multiple departments, agencies and bodies, creating touch points to enable the commercialization of technology faster and to enable us to compete globally. So really, we are so much further on than we possibly could have imagined when you were speaking to Dave Snelling, I think, this time last year, but much, much further on than we were then, and we're pleased to play a role in helping accelerate that even further through the CCAT.
Great. Well, I'll come back. I'm sure there'll be lots more questions around that agenda. It feels like, collaboration is going to be a word that's going to come up a lot. And of course, Philip, in terms of collaboration within the commercial sector, I know that you at HSBC, have been working alongside Fujitsu over the past 12 months as well. I mean, where do you see the benefits of seeking that expertise and partnership agenda driving things forward, and how much progress do you feel that you've been able to make over the past few months?
Sure. So maybe first of all, let me start just in terms of this sort of question where we are with progress. So I've been in financial services for over a decade, but my educational background and interest was actually in quantum. And I was actually part of the Cambridge and Toshiba research groups who were developing QKD systems. And so I like to think about the progress of quantum computing to compare to that, because quantum communications is somewhat more mature, but we've literally gone from laboratory experiments to where we are today, that you can buy these systems and you can send data through quantum networks that are protected by the laws of quantum mechanics. And so I think that's a really encouraging sign for where quantum computing is going to go as well. And I think there's a common theme today around investment, and there has been huge amounts of investment in this technology over the last 10 years. But what's really quite interesting and eye-opening is the level of investment we've seen over the last few years from commercial organizations like HSBC. And that's because we're starting to realize that the potential of quantum computing is so big that it's really going to have a huge impact to both customer experiences and to the balance sheet. And so it's a really exciting time to be part of this sort of quantum journey. Now, to your specific question about the work with Fujitsu, we're relatively early in our quantum strategy at HSBC, and a key part of our strategy, a key pillar of our strategy, is partnerships and collaboration. We know we can't do this together. We know that we need to work with hardware specialists, software specialists, academia, consortiums, support the government sort of working groups that are being put together. The only way we'll succeed in this is by working very collectively to ultimately identify where the final applications are. And so the work we've been doing with Fujitsu on the value assessment has helped us sort of, it's been our first attempt to structure the different use cases coming from areas of the business in a way that helps us assess the viability, the feasibility, the type of technology, quantum technology, that would work well with that particular use case, and also the commercial side and the customer side. And so it's almost like a toll gate process which helps you figure out the ones that you want to do deep research on at the end. And of course, we're ultimately interested in developing applications that are real problems, within the bank today.
I want to ask you about the communications issue, if you like. I mean, I come from a communications background, and quantum computing is one of those issues where it has a sort of a key challenge associated with it. Well, one, complexity, so explaining to people in a way that can feel tangible to them. But also, I think that it's fair to say that there's a lot of talk of potential, of where it is likely to take us. And of course, whether it be governments or private sector, everybody wants to see delivery on that potential, and they want to see something tangible and that they can get hold of. Where do you feel that we're at on that? If perhaps, Keith, I ask you first of all, on that sort of communications journey.
So I think we're seeing increasing demand for the kind of quantum value assessment that far-sighted organisations like HSBC have invested in, which says, well, what's here now? What can we do tomorrow with quantum-inspired and available quantum technologies, and what's there tomorrow? And quantum networks is one, in order to protect your data. We know globally there are states and organisations that are caching emails that they believe they'll be able to decrypt when quantum computing is real. So when you talk about something as tangible as that, people can understand, okay, this is cybersecurity, but it's cybersecurity as we envisage needing it in 5 years. And so we need to do something to protect that data, which we'd still be worried about if someone decrypted it 5 years later. And financial data is an obvious example where you'd still worry. We're seeing applications for the Fujitsu digital annealer, which is quantum-inspired, but I think the thing to say, you say quantum-inspired, people go, it's not real quantum. But the thing is, Nature just did a benchmarking study across all the different annealers, including true quantum. The Fujitsu digital annealer came out top with the 2018 version, which is 92% less capable than the one that organisations are applying now. So that's absolutely world-leading, and we're applying that in logistics, with port authorities, with rail companies. You're seeing like spin-outs from the quantum program that people can understand because it's solving real-world problems, and I think that's the key. Now, I think the next generation of that, making it more explainable to customers and clients and those who might use it, will be through quantum simulation. So we have, Dave will correct me if I get this wrong, but I think it's a 36-bit quantum simulator in Japan, and we're going to announce one later. Well, I won't get too far ahead, but we will be improving on that. And that is reaching the limits of current supercomputing capacity to do the simulation, but it allows you to test, well, what would happen if we had a quantum computer tomorrow? To start to play around, to start to build the algorithms in the same kind of operating systems that you'll later use when true quantum computers are here. So now we're beginning to experiment and test and see real-world use cases that you can use through quantum simulation. You can apply annealing to real-world problems. And then there are simple stories to tell. Like on the stage last year, I showed the graph that showed how every major breakthrough in AI has come through increases in computational power. And again, channeling the Dr. Snelling, who's I think manning our cell at the moment, but and we were discussing, well, how do I communicate the amount of computational power that would be created if we had true quantum? And he said, well, it'd be like super log linear Keith. It'd blow your graph apart, and then we geeked out on what it might actually look like. But I think that's instantly understandable, right? You can go, okay, here's what we've achieved with increasing compute, everything from AlphaGo 0, things that people understand. Well, quantum computing blows that chart apart, and so the applications of that are both unimaginable, but you can begin to interpolate what they might be if you look back at what we've achieved through increases in computational power more broadly. So I think there's a kind of here-now, real-world problem story, and then there's a way of telling the story that makes sense for people and what it means in the longer term.
I want to come back to that issue of the unimaginable that you raised, because I think trying to sell the unimaginable in a policy framework can be a challenge. But let me come back to that in a minute. From your perspective in the financial services arena, how much of what Keith was saying feels familiar to you in terms of what your organisation is seeking to do with quantum?
Yeah, for us, it isn't even about the unimaginable. It's about the percentage differences and compared to what we can do today. And so the types of use case we're seeing cover things like optimization, machine learning, simulation, the ones that we've seen here before, and cyber, of course, which is not quantum computing per se, but a response to quantum computing. And if I take sort of the example of fraud detection, if we can train our fraud detection models even slightly better than we do today with quantum machine learning, that's a global impact in terms of, you reduce the number of false positives, you can reduce the number of false negatives. It means you're stopping more fraud and you're stopping, fewer transactions that shouldn't be stopped as fraud, flagged as fraud. So, it's those things are not unimaginable, but they are very, very important to customers and the bottom line.
So, Rachel, tell me, what are the levers that the government is seeking to pull, the programs that you're engaged in at the moment to ensure that in terms of quantum computing and within that broader science superpower agenda, we as a nation are leading the way?
That's a great question. Just coming back to the communications piece briefly. So I think there is a responsibility for government and the sector to be honest about and manage expectations about what is possible by when with quantum computing. So one of the key ways that we're doing that is through the National Quantum Computing Centre. which is set up to work with businesses and the industry itself. So we're not looking to replicate what the industry is doing. We're helping to facilitate and build that industry. So the National Quantum Computing Centre has a Spark program, which is around quantum readiness. And it is about working with sectors to say, where are you on your quantum journey? Because, well, as government is as well, people will be in different places. So they're taking them through that journey and raising awareness, helping them to upskill and think about, starting to explore where are the key areas that this will be most impactful for our business. So that's one of the key bits of the existing quantum program. I think another key, we've had a quantum program since 2014, and it's now coming to an end. So part of the strategy thinking, so the strategy will come out later this year, and part of the thinking is what next for that program, but also, how does government work with industry, users, and the quantum industry to really make sure that we're giving people the best chance to be early adopters. And it is hard. I'm not going to pretend it's an easy thing, but I think starting on that journey is really important. So in terms of the wider program, we have the ISCF programs. So that's really about creating a better network in the UK of users, industry, academia, to really work on those problems together, and look at commercialization, build the supply chain. And then in terms of other activities, we have the quantum hubs across the UK, and they focus on comms, compute, sensing and timing and imaging. And again, their role is really to work with industry, both users and supply chain and components companies, to actually work together on applications.
I'm eager to throw it open for questions to the floor in a moment. Can I just come back, as I said I would, to that issue of the sort of unimaginable? I was quite taken by the anecdote I think that you used in the speech perhaps last year about when the supercomputer was playing the world champion of Go, and how the experts and the top players that were scrutinizing that game were sort of discombobulated, if you like. They were disconcerted because it felt as though the computer was not playing a game that was familiar to them. It was not playing by the rules, not speaking the language of the game as they understood it. And I think that what you were saying is that we have to some extent, to have faith. To have faith that this technology will take us to a place that we can sort of see the direction, but we have to basically let it do its thing to some extent. And I wondered whether, because I, as a former journalist, my sort of mindset or my way of coming at things is perhaps skepticism. And there's a lot of skepticism and cynicism around in the world at the moment. So how do you bridge that communications gap, if you like, of saying to people that trust in this technology and have that leap of faith?
Well, I think talking about multiple different things. So one way is through investing in explainable AI, which we do both in Japan and in the UK with the University of Manchester. So AI that an equivalent of, if you think of that famous move, it's something like move 36 or 37, where as Kiji, who's the world Go champion, gets walks out holding his head in his hands because he's just not quite sure what it's done, and the commentators go silent to say it's like watching an alien, a creature, a god, someone from the future play the game, right? Well, if you had the kind of explainable AI that we're working on, it would have been able to explain why it had undertaken that move. And then in the same way that a human player might be able to say, well, I was taking a bit of a punt, but I thought if I did this, then they would do that, and they would do the other. So at the moment, you don't have that because the algorithm doesn't have any history with it. It's just optimizing. So that firstly is investing in the kind of technologies that might enable machine learning to become explainable. I think the other thing is baselining performance against human performance. So quite often, you will trust and delegate authority to a human without them being explainable, without really knowing why they're doing what they do. And I think it's beginning to understand that it's the same authority to delegate that you're talking about with machines. And then if I can bring it back to sort of quantum, what I was talking about last year was how with that, the kind of power of compute that we have, you're now operating in a mathematical state space so wide and a recursive depth so deep. By recursion, I mean, if you do that, then I should do this. That it's going to take us well beyond story and narrative. And I think that's true, but if you can begin to build quantum algorithms in the same way we're talking about building machine learning, trying not to use the term, but the kind of explainable algorithms that we're working on, then again, you can begin to see how that might, in the longer term, become explainable. So it's about investing in the kind of technologies that create a safer version of AI, so that when you're running quantum algorithms, you can trust it. And then I think just in terms of telling the story, I think that's the key thing. It's making sure that you're explaining that you're not just investing in seizing the opportunity, you're also aware of the downside risk, and that you're investing from the start in developing to protect people against those, and then that you're assuring the systems before deployment. And of course, we do that in the things that we're deploying today with digital annealing and simulation and the such like. So. Different levels depending on where you are and how you tell the story, but it's also understanding that when it gets beyond story, we're going to need it to explain back to us how it's got there.
Okay, thank you. That's very illuminating. Were there some questions from the floor at all? I've got a couple here. The gentleman, I think there's a microphone coming. If you don't mind holding on just for a second. We'll take the two questions. There's the gentleman here, and they're also just behind as well.
Hi there. Hey, Karamijan from DHL. It's been mentioned a few times that there's like a threat with regards to people holding on to or harnessing data that's encrypted by today's standards. And at some point in the future, I guess the expectation it will be that they could be decrypted and all the secrets would come out. So I guess to a certain extent, that's kind of a bit too late if you want to do something now. But are there any guidelines that people are aware of with regards to what an organization can do? I guess the government's probably in a, they've got bigger secrets or more important secrets, let's say, than the commercial company. But are there any sort of guidelines with regards to how to protect your data from that threat?
And shall I take the question just behind you as well? Did you have a question as well? Yeah, please.
Hello. Thank you very much for the conversation. It's been very interesting. My name is Vinay Deary. I'm from D-Orbit. And I just noticed in the title we have winning the global race. And my question is, who are we racing against and why? And I could offer up a couple of things I've heard, climate disaster or China. And then also, what is the value of framing this as a race?
Okay. Let me touch on the issue of data security, first of all. Philip, that's one that you touched on earlier on that is a preoccupation. How much of the reason that HSBC is investing in this area is because obviously you have to be able to protect data. And you can see that somewhere around the corner there is a risk that people are going to be developing these sorts of systems and using them for malicious purposes. So you want to get ahead of them. I guess is that part of the preoccupation? And how would you advise other companies that are wondering what they should be doing in this area?
Yeah, I think so. The threat of quantum computers to encryption, RSA, and it's made very famous through Shor's algorithm of the mid 90s. That's really what catapulted a lot of this work with quantum computing in the first place. And I think I've got a couple of thoughts on this. The first is we shouldn't forget actually how far away we need to get technologically before we will find fault tolerance in quantum computers that will be able to decrypt methods of encryption we commonly use today. There's a number of significant technological milestones that need to be overcome. Number of qubits, the quality of them, the scalability, and all of that the good stuff. And I think the second sort of thought is that a lot of these quantum computers need to be accessed through certain providers, and therefore there is some infrastructure you would hope would somehow protect against malicious use cases. Now, having said that, the point that the questioner raised around the store now, decrypt later type of attacks is a real problem. And so this is something, cybersecurity is something that organizations should definitely be thinking about. It's something we're thinking about. And in particular, the store now, decrypt later is a mechanism where data being transmitted today can literally be stored, wait till a quantum computer becomes available, and then it can be decrypted and your information can be revealed. And so it's probably a good thing to do to think about doing like a cybersecurity audit within your organization and figure out which types of communications are more hypersensitive, because those ones in particular are going to be susceptible to the store now, decrypt later attacks. Something which is still going to be a problem if it was decrypted in 10 years' time. You want to be thinking about protecting against that now. And there's a couple of things you can do. So you can deploy quantum key distribution systems, which is available commercially now, and you can start running your data through those fiber networks or others, and that's one way of protecting against it. But probably the more likely way that organizations are going to have to shift is by changing their encryption protocols. And there's a lot of work that NIST are doing, National Institute for Security standards, and I think it won't be long before we start to see 2 or 3 or 4 types of algorithms coming out of their work where companies are going to have to seriously think about how they change the way they encrypt their data today to those new protocols. And that's going to require a lot of testing. It's going to be a big transition period. So it's, on one hand, it's a little bit away in terms of quantum computers need to have a lot of development, but it is something that organizations should be thinking about now, particularly for hypersensitive data.
Turning to the question about the race, I mean that I guess to some extent feels quite familiar, a sort of political framing of things, in the sense that it's a competitive marketplace. Countries are going to want to be competing for inward investment to ensure that their development of skills is adequate. As I say, that companies like HSBC and Fujitsu are going to want to come to the UK to operate in these emerging technologies. But I wondered, Rachel, when you are obviously having discussions with ministers and other politicians about the merits of advancing this sort of issue, is one of the key levers or the things that they can get a handle on is that they recognize that when there is an emerging market like this, that they're worried that they might actually end up missing the boat, and they recognize that they have to be in there early.
I think that is important. Just to touch on the security piece. So the National Cybersecurity Centre is the authority in the UK for cyber. So they have produced a white paper that provides guidance on how industry can take steps to protect their data against the threat of quantum computers in the future. It is in the future, I agree. And the UK is involved in the development of those post-quantum algorithms through NIST, so it's a global effort. But yes, it's a very good point. I think the UK, through the integrated review, has set out its global position for interacting with the world, and science and tech is a key part of that. So I think most of the framing for quantum is around the fact that the UK has key strengths in this area. So we are globally leading in a lot of the science for quantum. But we won't do it alone. It will be in collaboration with key countries around the world. So yes, it's talked about within that context, but I think ministers do recognise the huge opportunity from quantum, and the fact that the UK is well positioned to take advantage and enable the wider economy to take advantage.
Did you have any observations, Keith?
Yeah, if you don't mind. So look, I think there are things that are here now because we know that there are states that are caching emails in anticipation of being able to decrypt them in the future, and we should be worried about that. You should be worried about that if you're a business that is concerned about your data being leaked against you, because we see that happen, where data is leaked against a corporation if it does something that one state or another doesn't like. And so you need to be thinking now, would I be worried about if that data leaked in? You decide when true quantum computing will be here, if it's ever here, but is it 3 years, is it 5 years, is it 10 or more? But you need to make a judgment and consider it, I think. I agree exactly with what Philip said on like the thing now is just good cybersecurity is enough, and then they haven't got your emails to decrypt them. We developed a solution with Cambridge Quantum Computing last year to provide a quantum secure network, which is another way of that way you're already reinforced if somebody gets that breakthrough tomorrow, so that they can begin to use quantum in quantum computing to enable cyber attacks on a massive scale. Well, you're already secure against it. And then data-centric security is something that our defence and national security business is operating in heavily. So even if you get through the security of the network, which you wouldn't on a quantum secure network anyway, but if your existing network does, then your data itself is protected at that level. And I think that's another way of beginning to think about it. I'm going to have to defend the idea of a race being important because it's one of those that wrote about it, and I think it is a race. And I don't think it's helpful to pretend otherwise. I'm a national security professional by background prior to working in business, and a psychologist. And something that I think will be familiar to everyone is that we compete and cooperate. That's what humans do every day. We compete and cooperate with colleagues, with others. That's what humans do, and that's what states do too. They compete and cooperate at all levels at all times. And that competition can be super healthy, right? It can be like the competition to make the first 11 of a football team, for example. It can be a competition, and if you think about that in an alliance context where you're competing to offer the most in the alliance, which the result of that is that your alliance is stronger. And that's important because it decides what kind of a world you want to live in. So I think it does matter. I think it can be profoundly galvanizing as well. As humans, we tend to be galvanized by that sense of competition and challenge. And so I think it matters. I don't think you'd have the 24.1 billion investment in quantum computing globally that was talked about this morning if we didn't all have that sense of competition. And then I think it matters because one of the worries with both breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and quantum is the possibility of reaching a kind of escape velocity where progress becomes self-reinforcing. So by being the first to true quantum, can somebody catch you? When we had the nuclear breakthroughs, it was clear that you could be caught, right? We kind of met a threshold. You either had nuclear weapons or you didn't, and then people could develop, and that we knew where we were. With true quantum computing, it's possible that the scientific breakthroughs that follow mean that you're constantly ahead. And so if you don't keep up with that progress, and a nation state that has a profoundly different set of values makes that breakthrough before you do, well, now you have a really big global problem because that country's relative power compared to everybody else's would be so far in advance of your own that your ability to compete diminishes consistently. So I think this kind of technological competition matters because it decides what kind of world we want to live in. And so I think it's profoundly important. And I think it would be irresponsible not to frame it as a race because the reality is it is.
We've got a couple more minutes. There's a question there, please.
Hi, Faisal Kamran from Saudi. I very much like the response which you just recently got from Keith regarding the race. I also believe that the race is not necessarily a bad thing, but actually it instills a lot of competition and a good competition too. But I still believe that there is some sort of a framing that needs to be done around the psychology of the human beings to how do you put that across generations. You said about cooperation as well as competition. So if you sort of constantly talk about only security, which insists in fear, so you are doing something because you're going to have the fear of missing out. It's not about investing only in the opportunity, but you're afraid because your competitor is going to become better at something and it's going to leave you behind. So my question is that when you decide on these huge investments in billions and billions of dollars and pounds, is it motivated by the fear just because you want to be ahead in a certain global environment, or is it because you want to invest into the technology which is going to safeguard the future in terms of the improvements of the life of the people? The way I see it is there's no technology worth investment if it's not going to serve the mankind. So the best thing, in my opinion, would be to subsidize the fear with the potential for the betterment it does in the community.
Can I come straight back on that, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So look, yes is the answer. Fujitsu is a commercial company. It invests because it sees commercial opportunity. It sees all the possibilities. I talked about the potential for massive scientific breakthroughs. That will come in everything from the life sciences to health to you name it. It will be revolutionary in what it can enable through scientific research and breakthroughs. And that's another reason why everyone's racing for it. I also think that the message that you're competing to when you think from the national perspective, the message that you're competing to protect your citizens and to advance their prosperity and security is also a positive one. It's not just a negative. Like I said, it's like the competition to be in the first 11 of a football team. It's the competition to be as match fit as you can be to enable the prosperity and security of your citizens. And the UK as a nation seeks power with rather than power over allies. So the idea is that once you have that, then you're trying to enable everybody to rise and prosper. So I think it's both, and I think from a commercial perspective, we wouldn't be investing if we didn't see the opportunity here and see how much value it can add to the economy, and that's both through annealing today, quantum simulation today, and tomorrow perhaps true quantum. And Philip's here talking about some of the things we've done with them, but there are a whole range of a portfolio of clients now that are looking for opportunities that they can seize, not yesterday, not tomorrow rather, but today. And that's all about opportunity rather than fear.
Let's in the spirit of optimism, let's cram in one last question for the gentleman.
Is this working? Yeah.
Yep.
I had a comment on the gentleman from DHL. He was asking about how do you prepare today. And I think one of the things to understand about that is that you're pretty safe if you've got symmetric keys and symmetric encryption. Quantum won't defeat that. It's the time of flight handshaking period where you can get intercepted. So you have to look at all the boundaries to your system and look at how that is working today and how that could basically just disappear tomorrow. And I think there's a few mitigating strategies you can do, which is how much data are you moving down one channel. If you spread across multiple channels, a bit like wireless hopping in spread spectrum, how much can you actually be attacked if you're not putting everything down one channel? You maybe lose a few emails, but you don't lose everything. So you can do those kind of techniques now before quantum comes and gets you at the end.
Thank you. I think we're at time, so we should wrap there. I'm hugely grateful to the panelists for very, very insightful and exciting. As you say, I mean, it's important that we should, and I understand obviously from your national security background that one should be mindful of threats, but not fear-mongering. I hope was coming from the stage. There's a lot to be positive about, and I look forward to probably talking about more advances in a year's time, and I will definitely check my diary more closely then. When today has finished, you can get a free recommendation for me. The cycle superhighway out towards Docklands is lovely this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you.
Thank you.